Welcome to the University of Pittsburgh. My lab conducts research on a variety of topics in the area of soft materials, and the common themes are shown here. I'll walk you through some of the ongoing projects in my lab. The first project is this unusual situation where a polymer combines with water to form a co-crystal hydrate. We won't talk about this phase diagram in detail, but suffice to say that at high temperature, the polymer and water separate from each other, indicating that the polymer is actually hydrophobic. But at low temperature, the water and the polymer bind to each other to form a crystal. So here is a video of a polymer water mixture which starts precipitating a crystalline solid hydrate, and eventually this whole thing will turn into a waxy solid. Right now we are conducting fundamental studies of the crystallization process with an eye towards eventual applications as water responsive materials. Here, for example, is how the crystal growth appears in a microscope. We start with a polymer liquid mixture, and a particular type of crystal called a spherulite starts growing. In fact, it's not apparent from the video, but eventually the crystallization slows down because in this mixture, water is limiting. So when the water runs out, the crystal cannot grow further. A second A second topic is surface tension phenomena in particulate systems. Our common experience says that dry sand can be poured out of a bucket to form a sand pile like this. But if you add a bit of water, you can build a sandcastle. In fact, what happens is that the water forms tiny menisci right between the particles, and that's what binds them together, and that's what gives the sandcastle its strength. So this is a surface tension or a capillarity effect in a three-component system, one particulate species and two fluid species, water and air. What we've been looking at is mixtures of a particulate species with two liquid species. So here is an example. We just mixed together two liquid species and one particulate species. And after mixing, we dissolved out one of the liquids. So what remains is a porous structure. And if you look closely, you can see small fluid menisci that are still holding the particles together. We can make all sorts of highly porous materials with this sort of approach. By using metal particles, we can join all the metal particles into a large-scale network, and by dispersing them into a plastic, we can make the plastic conductive. And potentially, you could 3D print these because they have enough strength, just like the sandcastle, of holding their shape once they have been 3D printed. Now, my research is fairly interdisciplinary with a bent towards mechanical engineering. In fact, I have two mechanical engineering grad students in my lab. So one of these projects is the mechanics of rubber plastic composites. First is a video of a rubber band being pulled. Nothing particularly exciting, it stretches homogeneously, and you can see the black ink marks all separating from each other roughly equally. The second video is a strip of plastic that I cut out of a grocery bag. And you can see that this has a phenomenon called necking followed by drawing. And you can see from the ink marks that the deformation is highly non-homogeneous. What we are looking at is composites of rubber and plastic to see in particular if such composites can be highly tough materials. But there is something else going on here as well, which is that if I let the rubber go, it'll snap back to its original length, whereas the plastic will not come back because it's permanently deformed. So what do you think will happen if I stretch and release a composite? Somehow we have to reconcile a plastic that wants to stay long with a rubber that wants to shrink. So what should happen? What should happen is that the composite will bend in an arch shape because that's how you reconcile something that is longer with something that is shorter. In fact, when we do the experiments, we find out on the left-hand side that we do see arch shapes with the plastic on the outside. But if we stretch a lot more, we also see these weird half-tube shapes, which we don't quite understand. And we are now trying to figure that out, and we are trying to understand if we can use these elastic plastic composites as an approach towards rubber plastic origami to make 3D shapes out of 2D sheets. Finally, I have a deep interest in buckling phenomena. So here is a video of a thin film that is sitting on a highly viscous liquid. The liquid itself is forced to compress because it is sitting on a rubber sheet that is itself undergoing compression. And the film responds by buckling. But you can see that there are two kinds of buckling. One type is highly uniform wrinkles, whereas others are highly localized folds. And so we are trying to find out why sometimes we get wrinkles and sometimes we get folds. In fact, thin film wrinkling is pretty common in biology. I can wrinkle my forehead simply by raising my eyebrows. Um, but here is a cross-section of a pig artery, and you can see that the inner surface is heavily wrinkled. I'm advising a PhD student in bioengineering who is looking at the mechanics of these arterial wrinkles and then also trying to make biomimetic arterial grafts for artery replacement surgery that are wrinkled just like real arteries.